I filmed this whole thing, recorded it all yesterday, and the file didn't save. My mic was, I thought it was broken, and it is broken, but that wasn't the issue. There's a plastic piece that's broken. It was that it was out of batteries, so I recorded all of this yesterday, but I think that might be good, that now I have some more through line to my thoughts, because this isn't something that's scripted or planned or even fully calculated in my, Virgo Sun Capricorn rising tendency, that I like to generally have a really firm outline. And even though my videos, I you can tell I'm not cutting them, I'm streaming them generally, I do really know what I'm going to say before I say it. In life in general, I tend to be very, very precise and curated. That's very natural for me. And what isn't as natural is just coming out and flowing, and that's what I feel called to do. Because I wanted to talk about something that I'm going through right now in a more open, authentic, not even authentic because my curation is authentic, but in a more uncurated way, and that is the idea of the dark night of the soul. Because it's a topic I've mentioned several times. It was a huge part of my spiritual awakening, because my spiritual awakening was not warm and fuzzy and love and light. Rarely are people's. Usually we have to be backed into a corner to wake up, and there was no exception for me. I went through a really deep dark night of the soul during my first year of college, and I wanted to talk about what exactly that refers to on the spiritual journey and how I believe to be going through one right now. And I have a few things that I've written out in terms of dates and background that I'm going to draw upon, but besides that, I'm very much going to talk candidly as just from the experience, because I think that a lot of people right now are awakening spiritually, and most people are doing that through something a little uncomfortable or raw or wounded, and that often ties into a dark night of the soul. So the dark night of the soul was originally in Spanish La Noche Oscura del Alma, because it was a poem written by the 16th century Spanish mystic and poet St. John of the Cross. And he didn't actually give a title to the poem. It was ascribed to it based on its content, and the term dark night of the soul was then largely appropriated by the Catholic Church to describe a spiritual crisis in the journey towards union with God. And that's described in the poem, so that's the way that it kind of became a term. And while the crisis is temporary, it can endure for a long period of time, because it does tend to be a breakdown. And I want to read just quickly Eckhart Tolle's explanation of a dark night of the soul, because even though it's a bit lengthy, it's not too long, and I love Eckhart Tolle, so I want to share his words before I do dive into my own personal journey around this. So he says that the dark night of the soul is a term that goes back a long time. Yes, I have also experienced it. It is a term used to describe what one could call a collapse of a perceived meaning in life, an eruption into your life of a deep sense of meaninglessness. The inner state in some cases is very close to what is conventionally called depression. Nothing makes sense anymore. There's no purpose to anything. Sometimes it's triggered by some external event, some disaster perhaps, on an external level. The death of someone close to you could trigger it, especially premature death. For example, if your child dies, or if you had built up your life and given it meaning, and the meaning that you had given your life, your activities, your achievements, where you are going, what is considered important, and the meaning that you had given your life for some reason collapses. It can happen if something happens that you can't really explain away anymore, some disaster which seems to invalidate the meaning that your life had before. Really, what has collapsed then is the whole conceptual framework for your life, the meaning that your mind had given it. So that results in a dark place. But some have gone into that, and then there is the possibility that you will emerge out of that into a transformed state of consciousness. Life has meaning again, but it's no longer a conceptual meaning that you can necessarily explain. Quite often it's from there that people awaken out of their conceptual sense of reality, which has collapsed. They awaken into something deeper, which is no longer based on concepts in your mind. A deeper sense of purpose or connectedness with a greater life that is not dependent on explanations or anything conceptual any longer. It's a kind of rebirth. The dark night of the soul is the kind of death that you die. What dies is the egoic sense of self. Of course, death is always painful, but nothing real has actually died there. Only an illusory identity. Now, it is probably the case that some people who've gone through this transformation realize that they had to go through that in order to bring about a spiritual awakening. Often it is part of the awakening process, the death of the old self and the birth of the true self. The first lesson in A Course in Miracles says, nothing I see in this room means anything. And you're supposed to look around the room, whatever you happen to be looking at, and say, this doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. What is the purpose of a lesson like that? It's a little bit like recreating what can happen during the dark night of the soul. It's the collapse of a mind-made meaning, conceptual meaning of life, believing that you understand what it's all about. With A Course in Miracles, it's a voluntary relinquishment of the human mind-made meaning that is projected, and you go voluntarily into saying, I don't know what this means, this doesn't mean anything. You wipe the board clean. In the dark night of the soul, it collapses. You were meant to arrive at a place of conceptual meaninglessness. One could say a state of ignorance, where things lose the meaning that you had given them, which was all conditioned and cultural and so on. Then you can look upon the world without imposing a mind-made framework of meaning. It looks, of course, as if you no longer understand anything. That's why it's so scary when it happens to you, instead of you actually consciously embracing it. It can bring about the dark night of the soul, to go around the universe any longer interpreting it, without any longer interpreting it compulsively as an innocent presence. You look upon events, people, and so on with a deep sense of aliveness, your sense of aliveness through your own aliveness, but you are not trying to fit your experience into a conceptual framework anymore. Eckhart Tolle, if you haven't read him, I do highly recommend him as a spiritual teacher because he is he's very able to communicate to the Western mind, I feel like, about these esoteric topics. And even though flat out I don't think meaning is the right word here, I think that, like I talk about a lot, life cannot have a meaning. It's a categorical error because meaning equates to translation. Like hola means hello. Dove in a book means peace. Life cannot mean anything because humans are not ascribing life to a purpose in a sense. That's why a human life can't have a purpose either. It's just a categorical error. Doesn't mean it's, dreary or depressing. It's just the wrong word chosen there. And instead, the way that I like to think about it, which is still the energetic way that he sees it, is that it's the collapse of a conception of reality that used to light up your consciousness, and now it's a dark night of the soul because the light of your consciousness is no longer based on anything anymore. Like, it's a gateway into the new. And at the core of my spiritual awakening, my first year of college, I heard the term, and that's exactly what I knew was happening to me. I first fully knew I was going through something weird my senior year of high school because I always knew that, in a sense, I had a meditative or observant personality. Like, in math classes, when I didn't want to pay attention, I would just meditate on, like, what I now know as ethics and metaphysics and deep, profound things. But my senior year of high school, I remember breaking up with my poor boyfriend at the time and not giving an explanation further than I just need to work on myself. And, like, he was crying and I was like, peace out, bitch. And I literally was like, leave my room. I want to be alone. And I could tell I was falling into the dark night of the soul, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. And I just was callous about the way that I communicated that to the external world because I was falling so hard. And a lot of that dealt with the fact that I was no longer living with my abusive alcoholic mother. I was no longer physically or emotionally unsafe because I was living with my dad full-time by my junior into senior year of high school. But the fear and the terror was still there. And so I was having a dark night of the soul brought on about the fact that I didn't know how to take care of myself outside of a flight or fight crisis because I was so good at riding the waves, so to speak. Like, I always knew that when I was at my mom's house, I was in the thick of the abuse and I could be present in that. Whereas when I was at my dad's house, I knew that I was nervous about having to go back to the abuse. And so it was always this precipitation of having the rug pulled out from under me and shit going haywire. And when shit was no longer going haywire, but I still felt so terrorized, I was having a dark night of the soul because I didn't understand how to, like, take care of myself outside of a crisis. Like, my hierarchy of needs no longer needed to be just get through the day. I then had to deal with relationships. I didn't have to, but, like, my awareness was able to grow just from, like, here, now, survive into living life, and I didn't know how to not turn that into a crisis. I was realizing that when I was bored, I would cause problems and manipulation with my friends for no reason, not in a way that made me lose friends or whatever, but I would notice that I would just do something random or just cause some little turmoil when I was feeling safe. I would cause myself to feel unsafe. And As I noticed that, I started to self-isolate. I began to move away from my friend group, just more and more alone into me, which wasn't that weird because I was always someone who was more solitary, but that I always had like a group of friends. And as high school completed, I did find myself like eating lunch, preferably just like at home alone instead of staying at school. And I studied in Barcelona after graduating, and I was already a straight edge at that point. Like, I knew that I wasn't going to be going out and drinking. I wasn't even like, it wasn't a temptation thing, because for me, it's not like I get tempted. Like, I do things logically, and that makes sense, and that's validating to me. And I get to Barcelona, and even though I knew that I was there to study because I love to learn and I like Spain a lot, I still thought that I would go out and experience some of like the elite club experiences, just like sober me dressed up, because that's me. Like, I love to get dressed up and do me, and even if I'm not going to, even like now, lockdown aside, I don't go out because now I just don't even find pleasure in that. But at the time, I wanted to go out and experience Barcelona with my like roommates and classmates, even though like I was just there for the observant experience and the pictures. That I still got all done up. We went out to this really like high-end club on the beach that's underground, and we were there to see Marshmello. And this is just an example of when I really knew shit was hitting hard. And we got there at like midnight, and he was supposed to come on at 1, and it was like 1:30, and I remember just looking around the room at all these people having so much fun in the bottle service and the table girls, and they're like really, really intense service outfits that were just like bedazzled to the T, and just this lifestyle of, I wasn't like judging it for better or for worse, because I don't see things as good or bad. I just saw it as like, I feel no pleasure in the beauty or the energy of this. Not that I was like, oh my god, I'm so above this, like I'm here sober, like looking, like it wasn't that. It had nothing to do with that, actually. It was the fact that I was in the midst of people in such like unity, because it was Marshmello was going to play, like the DJ. It was very much a positive atmosphere, and he hadn't come on yet. I'd been waiting for like an hour and a half, and I just left. Like, I paid whatever $100 for the ticket to go see him, and I just remember standing there and being like, this feels like nothing. And from that point on, I just knew that I was diving really, really deep into a very, very dark hole. I spent almost that whole summer studying abroad by my entire self. I could not resonate with anything else besides my own energy. I couldn't listen to anything. I didn't listen to podcasts or watch anything for years besides just like sitting in my own terror, because I couldn't. That's the loudest noise there was. And I eventually, when I started college at NYU that fall, that was my dream. Like, I was literally going to NYU. That was always the dream, and there was absolutely no feeling one way or another about it. And as I did stay in college, and I even found philosophy, and that was like incredible because I could tell that that was going to be my path instead of acting, I was still so low, and I never felt bad for myself or trapped or sorry. Like, I was never, wallowing in my pain, because I had grown up in that feeling, more or less, highs and lows, but I was staying in the low for so long and staying in the crisis that I purposely started maintaining the boundary between life and death. I maintained such a low body weight because I wanted to see, I was like in a very rational way, unsure if I wanted to live or not. Like, in a sense, I was just the calmest, most calculated person with suicidal thoughts ever, because it was not like oh my god, I'm gonna do it, I can't take this. It was like, do I want to or not? Do I want to today? Do I want to tomorrow? And my thing was that if I just get down to a really low weight, then maybe I will just like cease to exist once I get tired of barely existing. Because I was actually like feeling fine, like, even though I was just really, I weighed the same weight I did when I was like 12, and I'm not going to share any triggers or anything like that. So if you have like ED triggers, don't worry, I'm not going to go into anything. And there wasn't anything really to go into. Like, I didn't have any weird behaviors necessarily. I just like calculated everything really specifically. And I maintained that, and it was like I was just a living, breathing dark night of the soul. And it's just also funny because now when I get hate comments or like body shaming comments or people being like, eat something, I'm like, but you haven't seen fucking anything. Like, I am thriving. And then like back then, no one said anything, I guess because I didn't really have a following. But that dark night of the soul, my first year of college, I still say is the most beautiful time of my life, because the only thing left of me, I didn't have anything like, I had very little physically on me. I had no one. I mean, I lived with 13 roommates, and I didn't converse with any of them ever. I was so introverted, and I stayed alone in my room and barely even talked to the roommate that I shared a bedroom with, who she's awesome, and she was like an environmentalist, so I learned a lot from her at the time. But I was so in my dark night of the soul, and I was supposed to be living the dream, and that was a very strange experience when I would look at my window and have the view that I had dreamed of for 19 years at that point, and it felt like an excitement entrapped deep within layers of being unable to feel that. Like that somewhere deep inside me, that voice was there, but that I wasn't able to access it. And slowly but surely, that just pure me inside, I had nothing left to lose, and so I began posting about astrology, and eventually that attracted a community, and I gained a following for that over the past 2 years, or 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and that then, led me out of that dark night of the soul slowly but surely. And I still think that the thick of it was the beautiful time of my life. I remember even going to NYU Health and being like, okay, I'm ready to, gain weight and whatnot. I want to get checked out and make sure that I'm okay. And they were like, everything's okay with you. We don't believe you. Don't go eating all this because it seems like you're doing fine and we don't know how, but leave. And I remember being like, so this really is me driving out of this myself. That was a metaphor for living, possibly looking and living like I was living the dream and being like, damn, I need to figure out why I am nothingness in all this everythingness and recalibrate whatever internal vibration this is reflecting. And eventually, like I said, I did get out of it because I just kept doing me because I had nothing left to lose. I had not done me for most of my life because I was just so conditioned to be in fight or flight that the fact of socially being totally me was just kind of fearful. And I was like, I can't live. I can't. I'm surviving. And slowly but surely I did get out of that, and that led into the past 2 years, which were very, very illuminating, enlightening years of truly, living my truth and incredibly inspiring others. But I can say that throughout my life, there's been a constant experience of anhedonia, and if you don't know what that is, it's an inability to feel pleasure. And I didn't have a word for that until a fellow astrologer described that, and I was like, I've always felt like I'm just flatlined while other people go up and down a lot. And it's not that I don't experience emotions, it's just that they're so deep within multiple layers of being locked up that it's like someone's screaming in the trunk. It's really easy to tune that out, and it's really deep in the back, and if you ignore it, the person will die and someone else can take out the body later. Super morbid example, I know, but it's not as if I didn't experience the highs and the lows. In fact, I feel like possibly my meditative observance naturally tends to allow them just to play out rather than take me over. But once I had a word of anhedonia to describe it, I felt validated for people, I don't get that much hate for it, but people telling me throughout my life, you have a resting bitch face, usually as a joke. I don't take it as offense. I probably do have a resting bitch face, which is fine. It's cute. But just also, I remember my mom used to scream at me to emote. When she would be yelling at me and, hurting me, she would be cry, do something. And possibly it was me both being, my rebellion was not emoting, and also I'm not a fight or flight person, I'm a freeze. And so it was just me freezing. And so to this day, any little situation in social life where I'm expected to show an emotion is almost like a mini, not a crisis, but a mini performance or calculation, because I'll still feel that, but I know that I don't want to show anything. I just want to be there. And I am now just very, very used to the laugh and the smile, and the more that I just spend time on my own, the less I still have that frigid fraudness to me. And now I just feel kind of the people who are around me that I do hang out with know that I support them, but I don't have to emote necessarily. And that's why I'm really good at holding space, because I don't feel the need to take on other people's emotions or put on a show to comfort them. I just hold space in here. And what I think that has turned into is an appreciation for Stoic philosophy, which when I found it in high school, it stuck with me. And it's the philosophy, it's not small s stoicism that people throw around about holding in emotions. Big S stoicism, the philosophy, is around meditative awareness of emotions and writing out and loving your fate. And that's why I now have this love your fate on my, I I spent like a fuck ton on this custom neon sign because I have it tattooed on me, on my shoulder. I love the phrase, love your fate, amor fati. And it's a phrase that was popularized by Nietzsche, but it goes back to Stoic philosophy around accepting fate, and all fate is what is to come. If you want to see my full video on like free will and determinism and what that does not have to do with fate and astrology, like why that is not an issue, you can watch that on my YouTube channel. But I love that saying, love your fate, because that felt like what I was doing my entire life, was just watching the waves ride out and not ascribing them good or bad, but just preferable or unpreferable is the big way that they look at it. And even in the least low lows, I still do feel like innately I am so good at meditating and observing and not getting wrapped up in emotions, minus sometimes when internet trolls will say something and I will be like, I'm gonna own you, fucking 12-year-old. I will own you in your logical fallacies. But besides that, my ego's pretty strong, but like even. And during the past few months during lockdown, it wasn't precipitated or brought on by the fact that I was in lockdown, but I've like blown up on TikTok, and not to an extreme extent, but to an extent where my energetic recalibration was very dire. Like, I didn't know how to explain this because I would see it happening to some people and I didn't really understand it, but there is a qualitative difference in the energy of your life once you have multiple, like hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of eyes on you every day. It's very, very different just because you're getting a lot of power and you're also taking in a lot of the collective energy that you're being thrown at. And it's like an extreme roller coaster, and you just, like, if you're on a plane long enough with turbulence, you get really used to the turbulence, unless you're me and you just have a panic attack for 16 hours on your flight to China and Bali, because that's what happened when I flew to Bali. It was hellish, like 36 hours of travel, but because I don't let up. But Mars, Saturn square, I do not let up. The energy of having so many eyes on you, it's interesting because I could see in my natal chart when I was younger, and I can feel it just in like myself, that I have such huge aspirations to carry so much power and visibility, and I'm really open about that. Like, I don't just, like, the internal drive of me is not like I want to be a celebrity. It's like I want to be the leader of the universe and literally cause another big bang. And if I don't have the Church of Scientology created in my name, then I've failed. Like, that sort of egoic ridiculousness, where I could recognize it as ridiculousness because it was a monologue internally that arose so quickly in my life that it was ridiculous, and it was not something that I saw wholly as me, but just like an aspect of consciousness running through me. And that I talk about it because I don't think that having a really large ego is something that is good or bad or preferable or even unpreferable. It's just simply more resources to use, and in some instances having a less dominant ego is better. In some instances it's really good to have a really strong idea of self. And for me, that's been something to like wrangle with and adjust as needed, and it keeps me extremely productive because I don't dare want to regret the way that I spend my time. That feels like a disservice to myself, is if I waste any time. Like, that is just a no-no, and that's something that I interrogate a lot in my meditations about, like, why do I feel such a need to run? Like, what does it feel like to sit in myself and be? Because I can do amazing. Like, doing okay, I'm always fucking doing okay. I'm doing amazingly. But being okay, how do I be? Like, how do I even be in the first place despite being okay? Like, I can do incredible, but being, that's the tough part. And that's what I think led to what is a dark night of the soul now, because I could feel the obsession with gaining a following, not just like the numbers, but gaining energy behind me and wanting to grow to the point of like, I wanted to triple like Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok. I wanted to somehow get astrology and like fucking thirst traps about astrology to there. And that led me into, on top of leading my course, which I'm now releasing like this week, so please, like, link, if you want to learn about the Astrology Academy, like, link below, come join me and learn and do, yeah, it's recorded, but there's also live lessons with me, so check that out below, like semester type of serious deep dive, check that out. But on top of creating that, which has been like kind of a life's work, but compiled into this 6 months of me doing that, on top of that, on top of seeing 2 to 3 clients a fucking day, on top of preparing for my semester, my graduate degree starting this month, I was also filming up to 14 TikToks a day to post. That most people post 1 to 2, maybe 3 a day of TikToks, because even if it's 15 seconds long, like that's a lot of creativity you're putting into that. I was filming like 6 to 14 a day because I wanted to dominate. I wanted to grow so quickly. And I actually found a video that was describing how in the algorithm, if you're posting too much, you might be diluting yourself. Like, because I'm dominant in a niche, I wasn't competing against anyone else but myself. So my thing now is to focus more on the quality, not the quantity. And actually, if I post more and it's not that good, it's diluting my reach. And so that was a wake-up call, because I literally was like, I could feel myself energetically dying. That it was so, like, if you're living out of alignment with reality, you know that you are dying. That's not dramatic. Like, when you are not doing something sustainable, you can tell that a part of you is dying doing that, and that you're gonna have to lead to a wake-up call to stop doing that. So that once I came to terms with that and the fact that there was like no way for me to continue doing this, it's not that I couldn't stop, it's that like I wanted to rather die than stop, just physically. Like, I wasn't sleeping very well because I was constantly thinking about, oh my god, I need to do this will be creative, this will be good in like this timing, this will be good on this day because the astrology of that day is like this. I was just so overcalculated, and on top of that, I guess as a mirror for how abusive I was to myself, I just attracted a ridiculous amount of online backlash. Not to say that I don't understand, like, with my vegan content, that triggers people, and that's almost like different because I'm not offended by carness. Like, that is them releasing the shadow onto me, just talking about animal rights and activism. And even critiques about the way that I do my activism, I take pretty well. Like, I'll either block the person if it's not constructive, I'll leave it up if I think it's a valid point that I want other people to maybe like see and understand that I see that, or I'll engage in a discussion, that I'm pretty open about that. But just some things about like me directly and receiving some just really ridiculous like jabs that like they know how to get me in a way, that began to lead me to get so nauseous when I would check social media every 10 minutes about like, oh my god, seeing the comments and the mentions, and on like joke satire videos, because on TikTok you're thrown out to so many people of so many different ages. It's not 20-something New Yorkers just seeing my content that can laugh at me being like really, really sarcastic. It's an 11-year-old in fucking Kansas who's gonna start crying, and like, with those, even if they're really young, then I just block them and that's fine. But sometimes, you know, you don't know the age, it's an anonymous account. It's always a fucking anonymous account who leaves the worst hate comments, and oh my gosh, I am actually so sensitive when it comes to that. And I'm very open about it, that I got a hate comment and it was like, you're probably watching this. If this person's probably watching this because they're familiar with my content. I got a hate comment on that I deleted, but it was on my channel trailer, and it said like, you would have a bigger following if you didn't pretend to be such a walking malefic. It's such a front. It's like, whatever, just saying I was like a walking malefic and so emo. And I thought that was funny because I talk a lot about how I had to let go of this obsession with being depressed and a tragic, sad girl 666. Like, I had to let go of that identity in order to not die when I was so low in my dark night of the soul originally. And so that I don't like hold that identity anymore. I'm a complex being with highs and lows, and just because I tend to be sarcastic, if that rubs you the wrong way as being a front, you know, that's on you, boo. You know what I mean? Like, the way that we make others feel is on them, it's not on us. We can always decide not to engage with other people. But that so got to me, one, because it was projecting like you would have a bigger following if you didn't have a front on, when I feel so enlivened by not having a front, and that's why I'm not like spiritual bypass like up here, like I'm pretty grounded. And that just led me into this high point of that, on top of being shadow banned on TikTok for the past few weeks because I'd made a video about demisexuality, and like people were just confused about that meaning something else, and I was just explaining how it just means that, you know, you're not attracted to people without emotional or intellectual connection first. It's like a variant of asexuality, and that got me shadow banned. I could see it on the analytics. Like, a lot of people say they're shadow banned and they're not. Their content is just shit, but I could see the analytics proved that from that point forward, I was no longer being shown on the For You page to new people. I was only being shown to like 1/10 of my normal followers, much less than I used to. I used to get between 100,000 and like probably 300,000 views on each video. I was now getting, if I was lucky, 5,000 to 10,000, which is like crazy. And so I just was so like, I was trying to view it as just the stoic of like, this is unpreferable. This will not go on forever. But as like the weeks have continued, it's on top of some of the hate that didn't stop on even my other platforms, which, I mean, thank you for 10K on YouTube, by the way. Thank you so much. Weird interlude. It just led into just this literal recognition that I'm going through a dark night of the soul, that the conception of reality that I had that felt so momentous about, even though it was painful, the new reality of like the momentum behind me and skyrocketing to the top and maybe being able to be an influencer more full-time than I thought. Not that I've actually never been paid through TikTok or even YouTube, because it's taking them literal months to send me a pin to verify my address to get money, but I've not made a dime off of social media, and I don't even think my partnerships have ever converted. I think I'm gonna stop a lot of the ones that I do because like they're not converting. But with that, I was realizing how the lessons in life, even with one big dark night of the soul, they'll repeat. Like, we go through the same lessons and the same time is a circle. We're repeating them at different levels and even more intensely as we get older. And I was repeating this sense of no longer being fulfilled by a past version of myself, and that crashing and seeing how empty that was, and now being kind of in this just like gateway of like blech and the new, and the anhedonia really, really being there with an inability to feel fulfilled with the things that used to be fulfilling. And that starts with, I like love movement and moving my body, and it just feels so meditative because I'm able to like grind out some of the buried deep emotions when I do work out. And that has just felt like nothing, like no endorphins or whatever. My cooking, I've done it and I've kept up cooking because it's like aesthetically satisfying to see it there. But even like infusing it with love and eating it mindfully, I'm just kind of like, I have to do this because I have to eat to survive, but it's not something I like look forward to or get excited about anymore. Creating content, I get satisfied when I see something turn out well, but in the process it actually feels like I'm about to like pass out because I'm pouring out of such an empty cup, and I'm like trying to shake out the last droplets. And with clients, I like pull out my computer to talk, and I help them, of course, and I make it where I have to fucking turn on. Like, I have to hold space, I have to delineate, I have to be there, but it just feels like I'm pulling out of such an empty tank that the car is just about to like shut down. And I know some people right now are going to be diagnosing me in the comments, which is funny because I went through so many years of psychotherapy and nothing that I was going through was ever a disorder or something that was like to be diagnosed. It was just me working through like intense childhood issues. But I mean, if you want to, armchair diagnose me, I guess go ahead, give me the algorithmic engagement. But just the anhedonia has just taken such an overwhelming encompassment of my life that in the stoic way that I live, I've just embraced that. And by love your fate, it doesn't mean that you become obsessed or approving of your fate. It rather means that you accept it and you observe it, and that love is just acceptance. So I'm not trying to change. Like, I'm mentally loving the anhedonia. I'm, not feeling it because that person in the trunk screaming, I'm not even like hearing them scream. Like, they've died. They're in the trunk. Like, Stan has kidnapped Eminem or Kim or whoever in the Eminem song is being thrown into the trunk. I think it's Kim. She's long gone. She's thrown out. But I'm just observing. I'm observing how the TikTok shadow man should not have fucked me up in this emotional of a sense that, when I was actually banned a few months ago for like 2 weeks for community guidelines violations that I didn't actually really commit, like, that was confusing. That was annoying, but it wasn't like crushing to this level of knowing that I'm not able to have my work recognized, and that egoic, superchargedness that is not able to happen anymore. That just should not have, objectively I can say like that should not have triggered this deep of a dark night of the soul that was coming, and I could feel it coming. But and besides that, I'm literally losing hundreds of followers. That I've heard other creators saying this, that when they are shadow banned and it feels like something intentional for like a risque topic, TikTok will punish them by taking away followers. And I've had hundreds of people say I had to search for you and refollow you, and I can see it in my analytics that I'm losing hundreds of followers and thousands at this point, even as I gain some followers. So that net is like really insane. And it's not like I think someone's out to get me necessarily. I don't think it's like one person or people reporting me. I just think it's the universe reflecting back to me how in not taking care of myself and my own priorities, because I'm so obsessed with being recognized and being like enough and like white knuckling and being like, I will do everything. The universe is like, fuck no, you're not. Like, you're gonna be shadow man for 2 weeks. Not that the universe, again, that's a categorical error to be like, the universe is responding to me, but it's more so that we're like all interconnected, and that's our human way of describing it, even though it's much more of just a direct synchronicity. But I'm not spiritual bypassing. I'm not turning this into like, I'm letting go of the false illusions. Like, they're fucking being wrangled out of me, but I'm also not wallowing in it. I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I am holding space and observing, and that's what my dark nights of the soul are, that I've had, I'd say actually nothing at this level since my one when I was like in my first year of college, that now that I've graduated and starting my first year of grad school this year, it's funny that that repeats, and that I'm just holding space, and I know that this is going to be different because it's not my first dark night of the soul, that I am much more observant, and that perhaps this can be the second most beautiful time in my life, because I'm just here and I'm okay with it, and I just keep saying that I'm observing, I'm here, and if pain is acute, it cannot last long, and if pain is lasting long, it cannot be acute. Like, literally, the recalibration and the way that the body and the mind work with pain, if it's acute, it cannot be ongoing for a long time. If it's ongoing for a long time, it cannot be acute. Unless you're me on a plane. That panic attack will last 36 hours. But I know that there needs to be a huge recalibration on my end, and that dark night of the soul right now is me waking up to, I'm no longer, literally, there's nothing for me to juice. There's no fulfillment left to juice out of the fruit of getting external reward. Like, if every hate or critical comment, or just like comment that doesn't even resonate with me, strikes me to feel nauseous to the point of actual, just like, I do not know, like, I'm not suicide, I'm not going through suicidal ideation, like, I'm not having to weigh that out, but I am thinking, like, is it worth it to, like, literally, like, go in a cave and hide? Is it worth it? Like, do I actually want to completely check out because it is so overpoweringly obsessive for me? Or do I want to just play it out? And I'm just trusting that right now I am, maybe I'm the same as that little girl who was once being abused. I'm in the low point, but that's myself. That's me now. I'm playing the role of the, you're gonna fucking, like, suffer because I want you to, and I want to show you my power, that, like, in a way I'm doing that. I'm, like, the creator. This is, like, gonna be so, like, weird, like, Nietzsche, Freud, but the creator in me wants to show off that it can create hell, in a sense, and I'm having to baby that small part of me until I realize that it's not worth it. And I'm realizing that, but I'm not bypassing or pretending that by just stopping it's going to get to the root of it. I'm letting myself hold space as I recalibrate, and I don't have an answer to what that looks like, and I know it's ridiculous, and I know that feeling as if a 12-year-old hate comment is stabbing you is, like, ridiculous, and that's okay, and I'm letting myself be ridiculous, because to get out of a dark night of the soul, we don't fight it, we simply ride out the waves until we then realize that there is so much light inside of us that doesn't need to be powered by external means, that's always there, and that's what I'm doing now, and there isn't an expectation that I have. There is not a goal for me to get out on the other side and suddenly be like, I don't care about external fulfillment. I am now okay doing me and being me and not accomplishing that. No, I know that for me, just a constant state of regret and humiliation is something that could be an issue for a long time. That there's a perpetual state in my mind of preemptive regret, that I'm so aware of what regret feels like for not accomplishing enough that I will not let myself regret how I spend my time. That is kind of the funnel for my productivity. People being like, how do you motivate yourself? I'm like, bitch, I have the fucking world of regret on my shoulder being like, if you don't make the most of this moment, you're gonna regret the shit out of it, and you're gonna, like, you're not gonna make it. And that's something that I'm so aware of and I'm so working with, and that's been such a collective theme that I am not, those chains will take a while to pin off, but I'm so open and observant to it, and it's not good or bad, it's just, it's not either. And humiliation I've talked about a lot, where it just feels like constantly, there's redness in my face, constantly I'm about to, like, burst into, like, a hot flash, just in terms of that, like, and I'm always cold, but there's always humiliation too. It's a very strange icy hot feeling, but that, I think, is just the extreme sensitivity. It's interesting because I have a Capricorn rising, and I'm just like, but there's nothing protecting, like, this from this, and so with Neptune on the ascendant, Chiron on the midheaven, I'm just like a little baby, but in a old man's tired, like, stoic, dying. I'm like Marcus Aurelius in an infant's body, or in an infant's energy, and I'm okay with that, and I'm holding space for it, and I don't have an answer, but part of the dark night of the soul is that surrender and that allowance of new light to fill you up. And that's why I'm sharing this, because if you all are going through a similar dark night of the soul where you don't know the way out, but you're just going through the tunnel anyway, like that's what's literally in the astrology the other day. I said the astrology right now indicates knowing that we have a lot of estimated time remaining, but it's we don't know how long that's actually going to be. Like the buffering is still going on, and we don't have an exact ETA, and we're just having to go and go and go. And the Mars-Saturn square coming up is going to be like a reflection of the fact that I have that natally, and that's like the major conversation in my chart is this big T square, and I'm just holding space, and I'm allowing it to happen. And I am, even when I can't feel it, but I know it, I know that I am very appreciative for everyone who supported me, and that has been the most abundant positive thing in 2020 for me. The most preferable thing has been the huge growth and audience that I've accumulated. Not a huge relatively compared to anything that I felt in the past, because I didn't have like any audience for the past like 21 years, 22 this month. And then suddenly within the past few months, it really has skyrocketed. And I know I'm very appreciative of that, and I have to let light come in to allow me to feel appreciative, because I can look at 100 nice comments and be like, that's cute, and not feel fucking anything. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate it or thank people or say that, but that anhedonia is just like that heartbeat, and I'm gonna let myself be filled up. And I'm rambling. No, I'm not rambling. I'm very articulate. But I think that that's all I wanted to share about my dark night of the soul, and maybe you're going through one too. And that's, you know, if you like this, let me know if you have any thoughts. If you want to like share your dark nights of the soul, I'm here to listen and to hold space.
But there is one thing you're all forgetting, that endless morning will turn to night, and when you